They killed him there and then, because this thing that is happening in Belayim, where Israelis and Palestinians are standing side by side to oppose the Israeli occupation, is the thing that the Israeli government are most afraid of. And they've shown this by their continued violent repression of these demonstrations. And on New Year's Day this year, I heard that Basim's sister, Jawaha Abu Rahma, was also killed. One more person I'd like to tell you about from Belayim is a guy called Rani. Now, if you can imagine, the first time I went to this small Palestinian village to participate in the weekly demonstration, I was very, very surprised to see someone at the front of the crowd in a wheelchair like myself. I couldn't believe my eyes. Over time, we became very close. Very close. By the end of the 6 months, he was offering to find me a Palestinian wife. But I remember once talking to Rani, and I was asking him if he felt that the Israeli soldiers treated him differently because of the fact that he's in a wheelchair. And he said, "Jody, I want to tell you two things. Firstly, I think you know very well by now, as I do, that the Israeli army do not care if you are walking or in a wheelchair, or a man, a woman, or a child." And that certainly rang true with what I had experienced. I remember during one of the night raids, an Israeli soldier rolling a sound grenade underneath my wheelchair so that it exploded up into my face. And I remember during one of the demonstrations, sitting right at the front after most of the crowd had been forced back by the tear gas, and I was sitting in my wheelchair on my own, and 6 Israeli soldiers simultaneously throwing tear gas at me as if I was some kind of threat to them. And the second thing I want to tell you, Ronnie said to me, is that it doesn't matter whether you're in a wheelchair or not. What matters are the ideas and the resistance that's in your mind. Now, just before I left, Ronnie's wife gave birth to triplets, so he's a very strong guy in more ways than one. After 6 months living in Belayim, I decided to travel to the Gaza Strip. So I made my way to Cairo in Egypt, and the Arabic I'd picked up in Palestine came in handy when I ran into many checkpoints the Egyptian government had set up in the Sinai to prevent people from traveling to Gaza. And I said to the police in Arabic, "I'm an Egyptian, I've left my ID at home in El Arish, but my dad is waiting for me, so just let me through." And they all fell for it, and just some hours later, I was on my way to Gaza. But I'll always remember my time in Egypt, primarily for being attacked by the police in El Arish, who attacked us with stones and bricks. And also when I heard the Egyptian activist I was staying with in Cairo on the phone being threatened with rape by Mubarak's undercover state security, and of course the endless identity checks and delays that come with living in a police state. And I especially remember these events at a time now when the Egyptian people have risen up with such a force that even a tyrant like Mubarak could not have dreamed of. And as I was on the way to this event tonight, we were hearing reports that Mubarak will address the nation at 8 p.m, where he will almost certainly step down. He will almost certainly... And this is a huge victory for all of us. This is a man who has been in power for 31 years. Before we were born, a lot of us. And it looks as if he will step down. But what we have to make clear from now is that the Egyptian people have sacrificed their lives for their freedom. But this is not the revolution of Omar Suleiman, who the Americans seem to want to put into power. This is not the revolution of Mohammed al-Baradei. This is not the revolution of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is the revolution of the Egyptian people, and we must support their revolution with all of our hearts. And when I was saying I'm an Egyptian at the checkpoint in El Arish, at the time I was just trying to get food to go to Gaza, but at this time we should all say in solidarity with those people, I'm an Egyptian. And we must stop viewing this struggle along lines of race or religion or gender, and start viewing our struggle along the lines of people against the governments that oppress them. So the question for us is, how can we support the Egyptian people and people across the world in their struggle? And for me, I think it is by rising up against our own government, the British government that props up puppets like Mubarak across the Arab world, while simultaneously now claiming to support the democracy activists in Tahrir Square. When will these hypocrites wake up and realize the Egyptian people, the Tunisian people, the Yemeni people, the Jordanian people do not want or need the support of the British government or any other government for that matter? I think British involvement in the Middle East has been disastrous enough up to now, and we certainly do not need any more of it. Earlier in this talk, I mentioned seeing Sharihan Hanoun smiling just a day after her family had been evicted from their home. And last week her smile came back to me. And it came back to me as I was standing on the roof